I create paint in very small batches, and these are my 3 colors. I create everything with a particular shade of yellow, which is an ochre. Usually two whites, a zinc buff and a titanium, a color referred to as quinacridone magenta, and ultramarine blue. And the process begins with, well, we'll just go with blue, a little bit of blue. So you would take, traditionally there was only enough paint created to last for that particular day. You didn't really keep a lot of it because a little too much drying and paint doesn't move as well across the canvas. So the first process would be to put some paint on my little plate here. I use a glass plate. I also use a glass palette, even though they're quite darkened at this point. And then you would smooth it with a little palette knife, just a little bit. Then you would use some refined linseed oil. Not a big deal. Put a little bit in the center. And then what you want to do is then use the palette knife to mix the oil and pigment together. The pigment is basically a powder, and there are a lot of pigments out on the market, but I'm very careful to use only the natural pigments and also the non-cancer forming pigments. So I don't actually work with anything with lead, or lead-based white, etc. Even though that was the traditional ground for an oil painting. So as you can tell, it can be a little deceptive because this looks very much like paint from a tube. The problem is, if I were to go ahead and apply this to a canvas, you would see little nubbies, almost like sand, because the actual pigment hadn't been properly combined with the oil. The only way to do that is basically with a sort of crushing method using what's referred to as a muller. So I'd wipe the excess off onto this, my palette knife. I don't like to waste anything. And then I would take this, and again, normally I would work with larger batches, and then move it in a circle, firmly holding it in place. Just a little bit, and then as you scrape it off, you notice a very smooth consistency, and you have oil paint.